Welcome back to FryMinis. I'm Eric, and today in our Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft coverage, we're going to take a look at what it means to be a haunted hero. So this comes from the top of the first chapter, character creation, and it talks about what it means to have a haunted hero, aka a hero that you're playing in a horror game, what it means to be a player in a horror game. It's got some cool advice, so let's take a look. Ravenloft encourages you and your group to safely explore the thrill of all manner of ghost stories, mysteries, and other tales of terror. While Chapter 4 guides DMs in how to craft atmospheric adventures, the spookiest scenarios will fall flat if you and the other players aren't prepared to engage with some degree of suspense. By the same token, the DM can't craft an enjoyably spooky experience if they're not aware of your interests in and thresholds for participating in fear-focused adventures. This section highlights elements common to frightening D&D games, features that you should be mindful of as a player, and that will help you create a character prepared to participate in suspenseful adventures. But it all begins with one question: are you sure? Okay, so this is setting us up to talk about kind of getting in the right mindset, making sure everybody knows boundaries, and going from there. You've been invited to play a scary game. What does a horror adventure or campaign even mean? Who's it supposed to be scary for? You, the player, or your character? Is it scary like a mystery cartoon or a slasher movie? What content makes it scary? What do you not want to see in a horror story? These are all legitimate questions and ones you should have answers to before participating in a fear-focused D&D adventure. Horror as a genre covers broad swaths of material. What you shrug off, other players might find personally unsettling. Everyone's experiences and tolerances are distinct and real, even if they differ from your own. Before creating a character, ask your DM and the rest of the group the aforementioned questions, along with any others that come to mind. Chapter 4 encourages DMs to facilitate pre-game discussions to make sure the entire group agrees on content, boundaries, and tools to keep the terror fun. Think of this as establishing a film-like rating and content warning for the story you'll be creating. If you're uncertain about aspects of the game, ask about them before the game, during play, or whenever a concern arises. Everyone's comfort and enjoyment of spooky adventures are what matters most. I think that last part's really important. A lot of times, yeah, you'll set some questions at the start, but then that's kind of it. It's okay to ask questions and set boundaries as the game progresses. You might not realize something was going to affect you the way it did until it does, and just raise your hand. It's okay. When planning to play a scary adventure, create a character prepared to be scared. Consider how your character reacts to being frightened and how that affects the creepy atmosphere of the adventure. Don't consider fear a tactical disadvantage or something to be avoided. As part of playing a frightening game, you're a participant in building and reinforcing a sense of dread for everyone at the table. If your character laughs in the face of danger, they undermine the adventure's threats and its broader atmosphere. When creating and playing your character, consider courage not as the absence of fear, but as the process of overcoming it. How might your character react in surprise before they rally to overcome the terror they face? Do they scream, flee, or freeze? Or might they throw themselves into battle, perhaps recklessly or for too long? Record a default reaction on your character sheet so you can respond consistently when shocking events occur. Beyond this, discuss with your group how much your fear ties into the game's rules. Would you prefer to keep frightful reactions narrative, or would you like to use game rules that present additional challenges and benefits? Ask your DM about the possibility of using the rules for inspiration to motivate fearful character reactions as detailed later in this book. Using this system, a character who possesses particular fears and uses them to guide their responses to horrific scenes might earn inspiration for reinforcing the adventure's frightful atmosphere. The DM might not employ these rules every time something frightening occurs, but your group might use them as a way to highlight individual fears and build an adventure's overarching sense of dread. First thought is, I love just write it on your character sheet. Here's your default go-to. Here's how I respond. A lot of times people will have like a default cantrip or a default attack, something when they're not sure what they're going to do. Just here's my go-to. And I think it's really clever to suggest something like that for a social reaction. I like it a lot. Also, it never hurts to ask your DM if I do this, can this happen? It shows me that you're interested in the game. You're willing to participate. You might take a little risk for some reward, and I think It'll generally create a better game. Knowing what frightens your character provides insight into their past and can motivate their behavior. A character's fear of cats might stem from a terrible sight they witnessed at their grandmother's home, while a fear of earthquakes might harken back to their experience of being trapped after a tremor. Consider 2 or 3 things that unsettle your character, what they tell you about their past, and if those fears shape who they are now. Yeah, so a lot of times when we're building our characters, we think about, oh, why am I an adventurer? What magic moment triggered this reaction to where I became a sorcerer, to where I decided, okay, let's go to paladin school. We don't always think about the scary stuff that happened. The more you flesh out your character, the generally better your character will be. This book assumes you're playing a character who pits themselves against fearful foes. That said, if you're eager to play a character with a shadowy past or sinister origins, the lineages and dark gifts presented later in this chapter provide such opportunities. How a character engages with the evil inside themselves can make for exciting conflict. Be sure that your choices allow your character to remain a reliable part of your adventuring group, though, and not a near villain the other heroes only tolerate. Yes, it's okay to be that orphan, thief, rogue, assassin. That's okay. But if all you're doing is stealing from your party or just always causing shenanigans because you're chaotic neutral, that's just not a good character. That's just not a good player, really. So work together. At the end of the day, remember, we're playing a game, so it's a group activity. And we have a special call-out box about From the Mists or Beyond. Not everyone exploring the domains of dread comes from these grim lands. Work with your DM to determine your character's origin. Has your character lived their entire life among the mists, or do they hail from another D&D setting, a place of your own design, or more mysterious homeland? If you decide your character calls some corner of Ravenloft home, ask your DM which domains they could originate from. The DM can provide details from Chapter 3 to help inform your decision. Although humans predominate many of the domains of dread, adventurers in Ravenloft can belong to any of the races in the player's handbook or other sources. The domains of Darkon, Dementlu, and Hazlick, for example, all feature particularly varied populations. If you decide your character is from some other world, collaborate with the DM to determine how you came to the Land of the Mists. As they're familiar with true terrors, inhabitants of the domains of dread rarely mistake characters from even the most outlandish worlds for actual monsters. I really like that last call out. I've seen it before where if you're in a mostly human setting and a player is an elf, and that player might want the town to react like, oh my god, an elf, what, whoa, crazy, woo. I like that they they call it out here, that not everybody's just automatically going to be afraid of you. And as I've said already, the more we establish a character, the generally better the character will be. Playing horror adventures is similar to telling ghost stories around a fire. You and the game's other players are allies in creating a fun, safe, moody atmosphere for your game. Contribute to this by keeping the following elements in mind. Focus on the game. Atmosphere requires attention. You're not embracing or contributing to the adventure's moody atmosphere when you're focused on something else. Limit comedy. Be aware that comedy breaks tension. Nothing dispels an ominous atmosphere like jokes, be they in character or otherwise. Player fears versus character fears. Understand the difference between scaring characters and scaring players. If you know a player has a fear of spiders, never employ that knowledge when contributing to a creepy scene. Consent is a priority. If a plot leads you to consider a path involving another player's character, always ask that player's permission before acting. Their enjoyment is more important than shock value. Know what's too far. If a game gets too intense or goes a direction you don't want to explore, make sure you and the other players have a method for raising concerns mid-game and support one another in doing so. Techniques for facilitating this are further explored in Chapter 4. Add to your own terror. Feel free to make horrific circumstances worse for your character. If your character has a fear of goats and the DM describes some eldritch horror, don't hesitate to ask if the creature has hooves or hourglass eyes. Enjoy the struggle. Not everyone can expect to escape a horror story unscathed. While your character should do everything they can to survive and triumph over challenges, any scars they gain along the way are part of what makes the horror meaningful and memorable. I really enjoyed the section. Setting boundaries, knowing that you need to commit a little bit to a game like this for it to be successful. I really like it. I'm glad we called it out. I know, certainly at my table, we generally have a fun game. Lots of jokes, both in character and out of character. but that wouldn't work for this kind of game. And so it's important to get your player buy-in, that everybody's going to at least try to commit to this. And certainly there'll be breaks, but overall, committing to something like this as a group effort will make your game more successful. So what kind of haunted hero would you build in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft? Stay tuned for more coverage here on FryMinis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.